Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress-Free IEP, the show where we help families build their village so they can raise their neurodivergent children with confidence, clarity, and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on the professional services and real-world strategies that support your child both inside and outside of school. From navigating the IEP process to finding the right providers in your community, we're here to help you connect the dots and feel empowered every step of the way. Whether you're joining us live on Facebook or on YouTube or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in and meet today's amazing guests. Michelle Steiner lives with an invisible disability and has defied those who doubted she could attend college, earn a degree, publish her work, or pursue the career she wanted. She graduated from Slippery Rock University with a bachelor's degree in community programming. Her writing and photography have appeared in several publications. Michelle works as a paraeducator supporting students with disabilities and lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and 2 cats. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I am so excited to have you here because the invisible disability is so hard, and even more so when people doubt you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, right. Because a lot of times people will, if they find out they have a learning disability or they ask about that, people will say, well, you don't look like you're disabled. And they're looking for the cane, they're looking for the wheelchair, and then it's almost like they don't believe that I have one.
Right. And so, like, with people doubting you, like, when did that start? Like, in elementary school, in middle school? What did that look like for you?
I think some of the doubting me really began very early on, more with my peers, though. I was really bullied for having a disability because everybody could see that I struggled in the classroom. They also saw that I struggled in learning support. But I think when some of the teachers really started to doubt me, had to be about high school. And this is when we were planning on, well, what am I going to do once I'm done with school? I knew that I wanted to go to college, but wasn't naive to the fact it was going to be difficult, especially with math. But I wasn't alone in that. I had a learning support teacher who told me, well, I don't think you can handle college because of your disability and with math. And she recommended a trade school, but that didn't really seem to fit what I wanted to do. And some of that stuff would have been a lot harder to do as well. And I was determined I was going to go to college, and before I could go to college, I had to be tested for having a learning disability to get supports with Office for Vocational Rehabilitation. I scored so low on my testing, the psychiatrist told me, well, I don't think you're going to go beyond community college. I get to community college and I faced even more stigma. When I asked for a calculator in one of my math classes, I can remember the professor said, oh no, we use our brains in this class, not calculators. I had an advisor who told me that I was going to have limited job choices when I graduate. And I also have had people that thought that using accommodations was cheating. And there's also been people that have said, well, you're not going to be able to get published, or you're not going to be able to get married. And that, so I've had a lot of those things where people have told me that.
And you came above it. You didn't let them bring you down, which is so,
yes.
like, I love that. It's funny because I'm bringing back memories for me. And when I was in high school, I barely passed English. Surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, but I barely passed English, let's put it that way. And I remember, I think it was my biology teacher saying something along the lines of, your thought process with writing is a little out of whack. Yeah, something of that sort. And I remember that. And the funny thing is that I went to law school and I was on law review.
Right.
And I had the highest write-on. So I didn't grade on, I did a write-on to get onto law review, but I earned an award. for having the best write on paper. And it's just like so funny because I think about it because I almost failed English. Like the
Oh my
teacher
gosh.
told me she passed me in senior year because she knew I had already gotten into college. And I had that teacher tell me that my writing was a little off. And it's just so funny that I think, because I let it influence me to an extent. I totally did. I
Yeah.
think, I didn't think I was smart enough to go to law school originally. So I went into
Wow.
teaching. And so, but then I overcame it. It took me a while. But it's just so interesting how teachers, how they can, with well-meaning intention, you would think, hope, they really put us down sometimes, right?
Right, because we want to sometimes we want to put kids in these boxes where this is where you're going to become and this is what you're going to do. And that I also see that with other like psychiatrists or the other people in the counseling community. We want to put everybody in this box. This is what you're supposed to be able to accomplish and achieve. And the box is never fit for me. And that has always been a real sticking point with dealing with OVR, dealing with just being evaluated on what are accommodation things that I would need. Nobody could put me in this box because I either get people that think that, oh, you can do anything. And the expectations are something that I know I can't achieve. For example, when I was in college, I knew that I couldn't be a certified teacher. It just was not going to be in my best interest to do that. I couldn't pass some of the tests to get into the schools. And I knew that just some of the material would be beyond what I could do. And I was happy with learning about the service end of special education. But I had people that thought, oh, you should be an elementary school teacher. And I had to explain to people that just wasn't the right path for me. And they would say, well, if you could just get your act together. And I hate that. And I even had somebody that told me last year, well, why don't you go? Isn't there that grant that you could go to grad school and become a teacher? And once again, that's opening up that wound to me. Like, I can't do that, but I'm happy with what I have achieved in life. And then I meet the ones that think that I can't do anything. And they'll say, well, why don't you go stock shelves, even though that might actually be harder for me? Or like some of those programs that they wanted me to do with a trade school, it wouldn't have worked out. I can't drive, so I can't see how driving a cop car or an ambulance would work. Nobody wants me to cut their hair, and there's cooking involved with math, and I cannot program a computer. So I don't know if some of those programs would have been something that would have been a fit. So I think, yeah, we want to pigeonhole everybody, and people aren't like that.
Right. It's one of the things that makes me crazy now is that when we look at disabilities and we're doing the evaluations, I say the 3 A's, the autism, ADHD, and anxiety, they're so often intertwined. And it's like, which is it? Especially now with the autism PDA profile, the pathological demand avoidance, which is the whole big thing in the community of like people saying it's not a diagnosis. You're right, it's not. It's a profile.
Right.
And it's just such a challenge because these kids don't fit in a box. And it's not, IDEA sets 13 boxes, those are the disability codes. And I get it. You have to fit into one of the codes. I get it to a point, but how long ago was that written and where are we now?
Exactly. Right? I agree.
And it's just, they say all the time, like, you've met one autistic child, period. They're so different. ADHD, like all of them, any of our disabilities are on such different levels. And if you try to pigeonhole them, it's such a challenge because, again, they're so different. Some have verbal issues, some have math issues, some have writing issues. There's such a different thing to say, oh, all of our autistic kids should be in this autism program, or all of our learning disabled kids should be in this dyslexia program, just like are around pegs in our square holes, like fit it.
Right. And it's about meeting the student where they're at. And I think that
Yeah.
that is so key. And it has to be a customized approach, especially when we talk about our students with disabilities and how to best serve them in the classroom. A lot of people might think, well, they don't need any supports. Other ones might think, well, they need all of these supports or that they should have that. And when I just always think about when I have a student there is, what does this one student need? Not what does the student sitting beside them need, or the student in one of the other classrooms down the hall that has maybe a similar disability. What does that student in front of me need? And I really try to work in with that. And I don't always get that opportunity to read every single IEP. Every district has different policies with that. But I've gotten to the point after about 15 years when you go in the classroom, we can identify the student that has autism by maybe some of the behaviors or ways that they're acting. I can also get the student that does not know how to read, and that might be a factor in why they're misbehaving, because it's better to be the class clown. And it's just looking at that student and always trying to shift that conversation that what does the student need?
Yeah. I love that you say that, because the class clown part, I always say, and this is from my teaching days also, that there's two reasons kids misbehave. One, they're so bright and so bored, they're just finding something to entertain themselves. Or two, they're so lost and so far behind, they don't want anybody else to know.
Exactly. Yep. And I've encountered that as well. I even had a student that he needed someone just to sit with him one-on-one to help him to be able to focus with things. But he could think outside of the box. If you would have him write like responses, they were all spot on, but he just did not go really well with sitting there and getting that information, filling out that Google form without somebody there to do that. But if you give him out of the box, he was great. I've also had students that had some behavior issues, but when we got them in front of the classroom, they could entertain and they could do a presentation really well.
Yeah, and that's, that's one of the other things that makes me crazy about the school systems is like they're all has to be graded and evaluated on the same process, on the same way,
Right.
There was one time, and I've talked about this often, my older daughter who's in 6th grade tells me, and I think it was last year in 5th grade, and she's like, Mom, I don't get it. I have all the research done. I have all the information. Why can't I just do the slides? Why do I have to write this stupid report? And I'm like, because school systems are stupid and they make you all do the same thing all the time. Right?
Exactly. And I'll get kids sometimes that are really struggling. I had one that was, I think it was history. And he goes, why do I need to learn history? Or why do we need to do this? And I said, well, obviously the answer would be, so you don't repeat the same mistakes. But exactly. I figured with him, I told him, I said, oh, all right. I said, maybe someday it may not be important to you and you might turn the History Channel off when it comes on. But right now we need to get this information done because this is what is important. And the same thing with math. Kids will say about math, well, I mean, I can't help them with it, but I'll have kids will say math or reading. When am I ever going to use this? And I can know all the ways that they might have this in the future. But I think sometimes the best thing to say is, I don't know, you may not use it. But right now we have to work on that. And I think about with math too. I'm not great at it. Is it a factor? And does it give me difficulties in my everyday life? Of course, but I can choose how much I use of that as well. And what supports I need to be able to get the help.
Yeah. And I get it that we want our kids to be well-rounded in all of this.
Right.
But like this whole thing of straight A's, like everybody needs to get straight A's. Why? We're not all good at math. We're not all good at reading,
Right. Everybody's good at something. Some people might be good at math. Some people might be good at reading. Others might be good at art. And I think that's just so funny too, when we talk about things that kids are maybe not good at or good at. A lot of times they try to discourage people from saying staff what they don't like, and I can understand that we don't want to influence a lot of our students, but they can also, the same person might say, oh, I can't do art. And I'm thinking, well, you're telling me I can't say I'm bad at math, but you're also saying you can't do art. It's just that is pretty much the same thing. Everybody has something they can do, and everybody has something they can't do. And it would be really boring, and not a whole lot would get done if everybody was good at just one thing.
Right. And, it's funny because I go back to I hear people saying, well, you need to learn how to write an essay and you need to learn how to write this. I'm like, I agree 100%. But what is the purpose of this project? This is a history class. Is the purpose to learn how to write something, or is the purpose to be able to research the topic, digest it all, and explain what you learned?
Exactly. And that can look different in a number of different formats. You might have somebody that can't write the essay, but maybe somebody else, and this is why sometimes group work can be a good thing. Somebody can write that. Another person might be able to do the PowerPoint or the slides with that. Another one might be able to have a song that could get people interested. Somebody might be great with the research. Another person might be really good with getting the numbers. And it's just, I think it's learning where that student is and how can they, even if they did it as an individual, giving those choices that somebody can do and picking from one of them, I think does a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. And I get and I understand, let's experiment, let's see where we are, especially when you're going to learn a little and find your strengths.
Yeah.
But then it should be celebrated of okay, great, these are your strengths.
Right.
Let's celebrate. It's okay that you don't get straight A's. It's okay that you struggle to get a C in a certain class, because that, it's the biggest joke. Teachers and lawyers can't do math, that's and I'm like, I was a teacher and now I'm a lawyer. So, but me growing up, my parents were math people. My mother was a bookkeeper. My father was an accounting major. He wanted to be an entrepreneur, but they were they were numbers people. That was not me at all. Now, mind you, I was forced to learn numbers because that's what I was brought up with. But I remember doing a personal growth seminar and they did the left brain, right brain. And we all sat in the horseshoe. And I was about as far as right brain as you could go, which is the artistic type. And they would ask questions like, who are you artistic? All the right hand, the right side. Who are you good with numbers? All of the left side people would go up. And they asked the question of who balances your checkbook every month? All of the left-handers and me, left side and me. And they're all looking at me like, what are you doing over there? I'm like, my parents forced me. They're like, oh, okay. So it's not that you can't learn it. It's just not natural to you. And and I remember, for me, my brain worked differently and figured it out differently. And that was okay. But to grow up thinking well, my brain didn't work like mom and dad, so I wasn't smart is sad, right? And
yeah, exactly. And a lot of times that's how people will view that. We view smart as somebody who's getting the straight A's. And I even hear people saying, well, I don't think we should help students that are twice exceptional. If they're gifted and they have a learning disability, or even if they're gifted, but sometimes we don't understand that student may not have those difficulties with learning necessarily in some areas, but they still need the appropriate accommodations. They still need that appropriate support for that. And it's thinking outside of the box where we just look at somebody and say, hey, they got straight A's, they're smart. Well, maybe somebody's smart in other areas. Maybe somebody's really good and has that. And we need to celebrate those differences rather than just trying to put people in a box.
Right. And how people's brain works. So I remember people making a comment of, that messy desk is usually a sign of a brilliant mind. And if you think about it, and it didn't, it never really dawned on me until much later in life of that's executive functioning skills.
Yep, exactly. I know, I struggle with that too.
I mean, my father-in-law was literally a nuclear physicist, right? Okay, he was a rocket scientist. He retired. got bored and went and took a CPA license. Okay. The man's desk was piles and piles of paper. It was such a mess. My brother-in-law, like when he passed away, my brother-in-law going through stuff. One of the
Mm-hmm.
funniest things was he found the invitation to his brother and I's wedding. Um, my brother-in-law almost didn't go to my wedding because he didn't get his own invitation. He did. His father just put it on the pile.
He put it in the pile that you didn't get. Yeah, exactly.
Didn't put it
We
where it was
find it
supposed
all.
to be, right?
Right.
And so I was like, see, I mean, and this is like what he passed away in 2020 and we were married in
Uh-huh.
oh my God, what year were we married? 2012. So like
Uh-huh.
8 years later, I'm like, see, you were invited.
You were invited, you just didn't find that.
Right.
Right.
You just didn't know. But like that's
Right.
the thing. He was brilliant, but his
Mm-hmm.
organizational executive functioning skills were just non-existent. And that's
Yep.
the problem. If we hear a lot of our 2E kids, a lot of our kids that are so bright, yeah, they could be getting straight A's, but they never remember to turn anything in.
Exactly. Yep. They have not turned their homework in. Yeah. And I think that's a big factor too.
Or they don't know how to sit and plan
Mm-hmm.
out of like, okay, I have 10 assignments due, next week. Let me figure out and plan how to break down the assignments, how to work on the assignments, rather
Right.
than staying up all night the night before to do them all.
Right. And how to study. And that's
Yep.
sometimes maybe they won't do well in a test. It's not that they don't know the information. The prime example of I had to learn that taking a test is really difficult for me to do. My brain, I can study for it, and it's certainly not always the best way to evaluate what I do know. And I had to learn I cannot stay up all night and cram for a test. I have to take information in really small chunks. So I'll have to study a little bit to be able to do that before I go in. And that helped. And I think sometimes that our kids, they don't always have somebody to sit at home and study with them. So that's where we have our learning strategies classroom where we will come in and I will sit down with students and study if they want me to. And sometimes, especially in the beginning of the year, I'll be cleaning out the backpack and I will find the papers and we start making folders. And for a while, I'm helping them to organize things and I don't throw things out. And we go through those papers. And so that way they have those skills because otherwise, sometimes the homework paper isn't where it's supposed to be at. Other times they didn't study for a test. And I think spelling is a big part of that too. When they had spelling tests, I would study with them. And at first they thought, I can't spell, I can't do this. And they got better grades on their tests because every day we took out those little chunks of information and we got them to study. And I think that's learning how your brain works is so important to do that.
Yeah. And how it's comfortable. I remember my youngest came
Mm-hmm.
home one time and she got everything wrong on her spelling test except for the 2 bonus words.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
right? The 2 bonus words she gets right. And and I looked at her and I was like, are you okay with that? She goes, yeah, I don't need to know how to spell. And I'm like,
True.
okay. And she's right.
Yeah.
And then also
Yeah.
looking at it, I'm not a good speller. Neither is my
Right.
husband. And guess what? She's got both our genes. She's,
Yeah, and she does it. And there's actually software. And I think that's the nice part about with technology that has come up. We don't need, if you're not a great speller, you have spell check. There's grammar check. There's even a Hemingway app editor, which I find is really helpful for me because I can go in and it's not the AI where it says, oh, it's creating something. But it'll show my mistakes. They'll say, oh, you talked about this in a passive voice, or this sentence is hard to read. And I go through myself and I figure out, oh, how do I be able to make this readable? And I think that's important too, because we don't have to know all that. And I can still remember some people were really hesitant against some of these accommodations or some of these techniques in the future. I cannot read a face of a clock to save my life. We have done, I don't know how many interventions on that. I can see the numbers, I can see the big hand and the little hand, but I can't do that. And I have a digital watch for that. But I can remember people, I can still remember, there's people that still say this to this day, that, well, you're not always going to have a digital clock in front of you or a computer. I'm like, most people have that. You can have that choice when you're that adult, have that thing. Or people that would, or I can remember trying to do cursive handwriting whenever I was in school. And I'm not against teaching handwriting, but we've tried, I don't know how many times. My handwriting is terrible. And I have limited hand dexterity. They didn't find out till I was an adult. And I can remember somebody saying, well, you can't be a writer because you have bad handwriting. I have not had an editor that has wanted to see my handwritten things in life. And we teach those things. If the kid doesn't get it or they're not responsive to that, then we have to get something else in there that's going to work. And if not, well, okay, that's just somebody that that's okay, don't have great handwriting, or like you're in your family, not great spellers. It's not the be all end all of everything.
Right, exactly. So to move on to your writing, so you've been published. Talk to me about your writing and what that's like.
Sure. I write about my life with having a learning disability. I have a blog called Michelle's Mission where I write about that, and I use a lot of nature analogies with that. I've had pieces and published in 4 anthologies where I talk about my life with a disability. And I can remember when I first got published, for a lot of years, I was really hesitant to talk about having a learning disability. I thought, oh no, that's too private. I remember people were telling me that you should write about this, having that. And I finally got that courage when I was diagnosed with limited hand dexterity. And my husband and I, we moved into our house and I could not unlock our door. And I was so frustrated. And there was a call in the mighty for what's a seemingly easy task for others, but it's hard with your disability. And I wrote about it. And other people were like, well, that's my story. Or I thought I was the only one that struggled with that. And that encouraged me to write more articles for the Mighty and for some other places as well, and to start my blog.
That is so awesome. And I know we're going to definitely have a link to your blog down
Yes.
here for any listeners that want to read it. But I love it because it's just, getting out of our own way, right? Like,
Right.
why would, and that's a lot of it. It's like, I remember like with doing this podcast for me, the longest time it's like, I can't do video. And I, started small doing YouTube videos, and then doing this podcast. And now I'm like, I don't know, 140 something episodes, and it's nothing for me now. But I remember that first episode with my cousin and how nervous I was. And like, I think back and I look back to it and stuff, and it's so funny, but it was like, just get out of my own way and do it.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's once you get out of your own way and you do that, then you're able to find that. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And don't let it, don't let other people push you down. Like, that's the other thing. Like, it's just, it's so easy for that imposter syndrome to come out.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I mean, still. Yeah. Right.
I can remember feeling that way when I was in school. I thought, oh, someone more qualified can do this. I shouldn't be in college. That's for smart people. And I really had to work through that, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be at. And another really big thing that I had to learn too was I can't control what somebody else thinks about me, and I can't control what somebody else says. But what I have that power and control to do in my life is I can control my response, and I can choose to engage in activities that I like to do, that I'm able to do, and empower me. But I can't change I have the disability, but I can certainly, I have that control over how I view it and how I handle it.
Right. And that not letting other people, it just, well-meaning sometimes, as we say about our
Yes.
teachers, but not always,
Mm-hmm.
I remember like one of my best friends in high school, and her brother was a dumb jock. He totally was.
Right. Uh-huh.
I mean, he's single family, single mom, that
Mm-hmm.
only didn't go to college and all that other stuff. Um, yeah, he put himself through med school, and he's an
Wow.
anesthesiologist doctor now, right?
That's
Like,
awesome. Yeah,
and he
because
was
he.
labeled as, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you'll never go to college. You're just the dumb jock. We'll push, here. But he
Right.
put himself through undergrad, obviously, med school, and all of the other stuff, and
Right.
got to where he is because he didn't let everybody else stop him.
Right. Right. Exactly. You can't let somebody else take that pen and write your life for you, because you may not like the story someone else is going to write. So I think it's going and doing those things in your life, that going after what you want and being able to find a way to do it is also key too.
Exactly. And that was me too. Like, I didn't think I was smart enough to go to
Hmm.
law school. I was always interested in it. I would loved it, but I didn't think I
Right.
was smart enough. So I'm just going to become a teacher. Not saying just a teacher, because teachers are fabulous.
Yeah.
I loved it,
Right.
but it was just law school wasn't. And so what else did I love? I loved kids. And so I was going to go into teaching.
Right.
And then later on,
Exactly.
it was just, I mean, my story is a little bit funnier because I never said I'm going to go to law school. I just kind of like, I'm just going to take my LSAT and see what happens. And
Oh my
then the
goodness.
snowball of events, and all of a sudden I'm getting an acceptance letter saying I'm going to law school. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to law school. Like, it was one of those things, like, because it was never, I set a goal to reach it.
Right.
It's just like, kind of like, let's see what happens. And that's the thing. It's like, and that's a lot of the reason I do what I do, is because I don't want kids to go through what I went through as young.
Hmm. Right.
I'm such a strong believer on everybody can flourish in where they are, and to know that. My kids know I don't expect you to get straight A's. I don't want you to
Right.
get straight A's, because to me, you're just doing what you need to do to get the A. Are you really learning the material? Are you really understanding the material? Like, I want you to
Hmm.
figure out what you enjoy and then focus on that, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, and becoming that learner. Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's one of the reasons when I do my job, is I don't want kids to feel the same way that I do. And I think being that paraeducator has really helped me to be more empathetic with having a learning disability. I know what a lot of my students are going through. Not every single one of them, because I haven't walked through anybody else's life except for mine. But there are a lot of similarities that I hear. It's almost like hearing a recording of myself at that age. I hate my disability. I wish I didn't have it, and I feel really dumb. And I get to be that person that goes over there, and I get to say, you're not dumb. And it's not a bad thing to have a disability. And I also show them how to advocate. And I think that's so key, because I'll have a student that just doesn't understand something. And especially if it's math or something that I can't help them with, that's where it's the perfect storm, because I get that chance to go to them and I can say, all right, let's go to your teacher and ask for help. But I'm afraid. I said, well, I'll go with you. And I try to let them be the one to speak up for what they need. And I think the most amazing part of that is when I have that student that was afraid at the beginning of the year is now raising their hand and asking questions. And I think that is so key for that. And because one day all my students will leave me, and I really hope every dream of theirs comes true. But for a lot of them, their disabilities are going to stay. And it's so key now that we get that. And I think rather than having this be a hindrance for me, having a disability has really been something that has been an asset that I can be able to use. And I think without it, I don't think I would have been as empathetic and as caring as I am.
Yeah. And I love that you say that the kids participating, because I know, like, I remember as a child, and I'm sure this is like the same for almost all kids, is like, well, I don't want to ask a question because then I'll feel stupid. What if everybody laughs at me? Right.
Yep.
Like,
Exactly.
but the reality of
Yep.
it is that 9 times out of 10, I would say the majority of the class is thinking the same question.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
And it's like, even as an adult, like in law class, in, my
Uh-huh.
master's program, in whatever, like asking a question in a group thing of like, everybody gets that initial fear of like, what if people would think I'm going to be stupid? I'm like, you know what? What if they do? Right?
Yeah.
What if they do?
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
want to know, I want to learn. I want to know, like, I don't understand what you meant when you said XYZ. Can
Mhm.
you explain that to me?
Right. And I think that is the key thing too, because sometimes you may not understand that. And other people might have that same question. They might be afraid to ask. I can remember being afraid to ask too, or even being afraid to answer a question for fear I would get it wrong. Well,
Right.
what's the worst thing? I have people too. I always have to tell myself, if I'm sending out an article, if I want to get it published for review, what's the worst thing they're going to say is no. And
Yeah.
that's okay, because that's just not the right place for me, and that's all right, or just maybe not the right time. But I can remember there was a teacher that I had, and if he about asking questions, he was not for that. He would, you can ask questions afterwards, or actually he said, I don't want to, after I explain something, I don't want to hear you say I don't understand, because I just told you. Well, you might have just gave an explanation, or you might have just gave some information, but that doesn't mean that everybody's going to get it, and that's not going to mean that everybody understands that. And I can remember that teacher was difficult for me. He was a very hard teacher. And I remember one time I was in the classroom and I was coloring a picture of a map. And I thought, oh, I'm doing great. And he held up the picture in front of the class and said, does this look like she's doing her best? And my mom and dad brought that up at the meeting. And I can just look back on that. And I just think that person didn't understand that people will experience class and life differently.
Yeah. God. And it's so, like, I don't get teachers that do that, but they
Yeah.
do, like, and I know they're
Yeah.
not like, let's embarrass this kid, but they don't think it
Right.
through sometimes.
Right.
Um,
On how to do that.
but I can't,
Yeah.
like, one of the biggest things in communication that I remember is that just because I explain it the way I understand it doesn't mean the listener is going to understand it the way I
Yeah.
explained it. And that's
Exactly.
not their fault. That's
Uh-huh.
my fault, right? Because I'm not explaining it the way they need to hear it. And
Right. And
that's,
there's,
yeah,
yeah, and there's different ways to explain things. And who knows, maybe somebody else can explain that in a way somebody can understand that. But it's asking that and having that communication that's so important for that.
right. Exactly. This has been so awesome, Michelle. So was there any questions that I didn't ask you that you wish that I had asked you?
I think we got everything. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, because I love having people like you on the show with the hidden disabilities and that you've
Hmm.
achieved to give our listeners, like, don't limit yourself, don't limit your children. Let them be who
Right.
they are, and be okay with that,
Yeah, exactly.
because you can achieve things. So thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your life story with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Stress Free IEP. We hope today's conversation gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. You can always learn more and connect with me at schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not